Hey guys, GhazzyTV here with another Path of Exile video for 3.21 Crucible League. This one is gonna be my league starter, and guess what? We did it. Syndicate operatives are still dead. On the other hand, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now, and don't forget to like the video either, because we got Mage Skeletons back on track, boys. Now the thing is, Mage Skeletons used to be one of the best minion builds that we've seen in a very long time. Then GGT took the biggest nerf hammer they found, crushed their knees, and then did a lot of other things I can't say here on Twitch or on YouTube. They were kind of so-so, or, you know, just a fraction of their former self. However, with the recent changes to returning projectiles from the patch notes, we have been able to come up with a solution to making them a little bit more comfortable. Again, I want to stress, they were fine to play despite being heavily nerfed. Not the best, but still fine to play. But now, they're a little bit better, and I would consider them to be really nice, and I'm very likely going to be league starting this on 3.21 now on Friday. So basically there's two things that is making Mage Skeletons return in the current state of the game. The first one is the Dead Reckoning Threshold Jewel, which is the way you're going to make your skeletons into mages, is now gated behind a vendor recipe instead. A video to that recipe where the reveal for that one is down in the descriptions below. Now, the Dead Reckoning being very easily accessible now early in the league allows us to go into Mage Skeletons in a much smoother and effective way. Mage Skeletons, despite the damage nerfs, is really effective at leveling throughout the campaign in a very effective manner. On top of this, we don't need to switch to any other abilities because we're supposed to play Mage Skeletons for the endgame as well, which makes this a very comfortable league starting build to play. Unlike builds like Poison SRS, for example, they have a position where they cost quite a lot to get to the endgame variant of it. Mage Skeletons don't really have this issue. They will perform slightly worse than something like the current meta of Poison SRS, but it will also cost a fraction of the currency to get going. So for those of you who wants to play the meta in the current state of the league, you are then able to league start as Mage Skeletons and then transition into the Poison SRS when you can afford it if you so choose to do so. In the descriptions below, you'll find yourself a link to the actual written build guide, which is now updated for the league launch, as well as all my other build guides are going to be updated before the league launches. So do make sure you check that out. The POBs are split in 3 different POBs, and this has most to do with the configuration tab. Normally, I tell people to cap their elemental resistances, and if you have the possibility to get some chaos rest, that is preferable. But this will be 3 different POBs because of the configuration, which I'll show you here in a bit. The skill tree is very straightforward. We're going to rush out on the side, pick up Life Node and Enduring Bond, level with something like Freezing Pulse and Frost Bomb and Frost Blink, and then move over to potentially SRS if you'd like to, or you can level with Absolution from level 12, which actually carries you all the way into red tier maps. You can even level with the notorious Zoomancer play if you so choose to. However, due to the easy access to Dead Reckoning, you are able to early switch on to the Mage Skeletons whenever you get the available access to that recipe. The leveling sections for this build is in the written guide. There's also a little bit of a couple sections here in the skill set as you're leveling if you want to look at the POB. On the left-hand side and the bottom on the skill tree, you can actually see different leveling segments, such as, like I just said, going Life, Enduring Bond, and picking up Lord of the Dead. And then for level 30, you're going to get some HP and more nodes here for your zombies to have some extra meat shields. So there's basically some leveling trees you can go with as well. Do keep in mind that this build is using a cluster jewel. However, it is a very cheap, low-budget cluster. You don't have to have all of these notables. They don't really, they're not even spec'd into them. They don't really give that much damage, to be fair. However, you can pick up a very low item level jewel that makes it very cheap. The main purpose behind this is to get into some extra damage, but most importantly, pick up a medium cluster whilst we're picking up damage so that we can get a Blessed Rebirth. This is a very cheap and easily alteration craftable medium cluster jewel, which is only needed for the higher endgame content because your skeletons are going to start dying if you don't have this notable. This is not something you need to worry about till you get to the higher yellows or red tier maps, sometimes even later red tier maps. And besides that, the build is very straightforward when it comes to the remaining notables that we're taking. We're going to be going for the minion cluster on the left-hand side, mana reservation through the mana mastery, and picking up a lot of block, allowing us to have some comfortable block nodes. This allows us to have about 77,000 EHP with a really low budget build. And you can always change the Plaguebringer node into a Bone Barrier to bring up the EHP even further. But again, this is a very low budget initial starting approach to the build to clear off the campaign, get to the end game with a low budget style. Item wise, we are going to be using a Flesh Crafter, which should be very cheap in the coming league, since this build is not going to be as played as much as the poison versions of minions in the current league. So if you're looking to play that juicy mage skeletons, despite it not being meta, this is the play for you. The weapons in this build is using a +1 with a tiny bit of minion damage. We have a life recovery and block shield, which is probably the most expensive item on the build. You could use a surrender. The surrender is definitely more expensive. The problem with the surrender, though, is the price. You can use a rare one instead. Again, this is not mandatory. It's something that is very comfortable for the high end game mapping stage, but it's something you can wait with till the very end. Helmet-wise, we're going to go for a bench craft for extra zombies and skeletons, but most importantly, life and having an extra minion skill. We're going to have some essence crafted gloves, very easy to do. Generic life and rest boots with movement speed. We're going to oil the death attunement to have some HP. If you want to have a higher budget, you can get an extra skeleton through the Elder Influenced Amulet. Bone rings to get your elemental rest cap for your minions, and then we're going to run with added cold, fire, or lightning jewels with life on them, which should be very cheap with the current state of the meta. Other than that, it's just the Dead Reckoning and the large clusters and medium clusters, as I mentioned. The skill-wise is very straightforward, and we're going to talk about the skeletons in a bit. In our weapon, which we're going to have a trigger craft, we're going to go for a life tap bone offering desecrate setup. We're going to use a punishment curse and shield charge fast attacks for your mobility. Raise zombies, raise specters, animate guardian, minion life. There's a link in the descriptions below to the animate guardian in-depth mechanical guide, which will show you how that works, what it does, what kind of gear you can put on it, so you can make sure that he stays alive without any problems, because he brings a lot of power to the field. Outside of that, the race specters are very straightforward. You can check them on the left-hand side. Go down here, click Manage Specters, and you'll see that we're going to use an Arena Master, and then we're going to use Carnage Chieftains. And if you have 3 specters with the oil, we'll use 2 Carnage Chieftains, which is why in the configuration, we've set your minions to have 2 Frenzy Charges. Outside of this, we're using Determination, and we're going to use the Skitterbots for Chill and Shock, as well as Convocation and Flame Dash. And then we're going to have a Feeding Frenzy supported Stone Golem with Tempest Shield and Defiance Banner as well. So it's very, very generic and very simple. But before I'm going to talk about the damage and the higher budget versions real quick, I'm going to talk about what is the return approach for this build. Now, first things first, we're going to use Volsummo Skeletons, obviously. Outside of that, we're going to link them with Spell Echo and Minion Damage. And then the other support teams are a little bit specific. Predator is mainly for single target approach. You can choose to skip this and run something like Hypothermia instead if you prefer. I'm a big fan of using Predator myself, though. And then for clearing, I always want to have Pierce, and then I would like to use a GMP. Now, obviously, there's going to be some color issues, which is why you can change the Predator to a Hypothermia. By doing so, you can switch Hypothermia for GMP when it comes to clearing, together with Pierce to have a comfortable clearing experience, and then switch those two when it comes to single target. And what do we then switch to? You can switch the Hypothermia, or in this case, GMP or Predator, to a faster projectiles as well as Predator or Hypothermia if you choose to run that. And why are we then using faster projectile? Now keep in mind this is only going to be used if you have the anomalous version. This is an alternative quality gem that is either purchasable, it's a very common one, shouldn't be expensive, and then available through the heist encounters or the heist blueprints. So what does this then do? Faster projectile anomalous makes it so that projectiles from supporter skills have a 60% chance with 20% quality to return to their final target, towards the origins of the projectile after hitting their final target. Now, the changes for 3.21 is making it so that projectiles will return if they hit a wall, if they are finishing its travelings, basically the maximum distance the projectile will fly. Once it reaches that point, and if they then can return, it will then return to you. So this is why we're going to be using Pierce for single target. What this allows us to do is very straightforward. You will shoot, or your skeletons will shoot projectiles through the boss. They will pierce the boss, and because they are going to have a 60% chance to then return to you, they are not going to return after hitting the boss. They will pierce the boss, finish their traveling, and then once they reach their max distance, will then have a 60% chance to return, and on their way back, it can hit the target again. So what does this then mean? This means that our DPS in the POB right here, 1189849.9, is multiplied by 1.6 because there's a 60% chance for us to hit twice for all of our attacks, or casts in this case. That is 1.9 million Shaper DPS in absolute dogshit gear. Now, we are using a punishment curse, which gives us extra damage when the enemy is below 50% HP. So to calculate it, we can go to configuration and check enemy is on low life, and take the 1.9 million, and then we take the new number, which is 1.8 million, and multiply that by 1.6, because of the 60% chance to deal double hits, basically, and add the previous number and divide that by 2, and you'll see that we're doing 2.4 million Shaper DPS with absolute dogshit gear with this build. Now, obviously, this is nowhere near what we used to have with this build before the nerfs, but this is comparable to something like the SRS builds, for example, or other minion builds, and it provides a very different playstyle, which is very comfortable specifically for clearing. Now, to show you the higher budget version, we have a medium budget Mage Skeleton version, which is sitting at 6.586 million Shaper DPS. This is with the punishment, and without it's sitting at 4.2. So this is doing a bit around 5 million Shaper DPS. And if you then look at the higher budget version, which we've thrown together, we're doing about 29 million. And then without it, we're doing 17.9. So we're taking the average in between there. So there's a ways for us to actually bring this build up to a point where it is doing this very, very, very respectable damage output. The high budget version is quite expensive, obviously, because using Kingmaker, among other things. But this one packs about 10 million EHP. This is a common thing a lot of people look at when it comes to PUB, and this is actually calculated because of the build going CI. And we're using Aegis Aurora. This shield is screwing over EHP calculation with a recovery so much that it's almost impossible for us to actually properly calculate how much EHP the build will have. Essentially, as long as you're taking hits, consider that is not one-shotting you, you shouldn't be able to die. However, if you disable the EHP calculator from the EHP gain on block and suppress, you can see that we're only sitting at 140,000 EHP, which is still pretty damn good. But this build is absolutely beautiful to play. For those of you who tried it before, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I can strongly recommend trying this out as a league starter and using this character as something you can build up currency to play something else later if you want to, or further improve on this build. It's a personal one of my top favorite builds that I've ever played in the game, and therefore I'm very likely going to be league starting this on Friday. That's it for this video. I hope you liked it. If you do, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe for more content, and leave a comment down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe. Keep rocking.